to Movie Buffs, a show that covers the best action films of all time. I'm your host, Shani B.
And I'm your other host, Cisco, aka Misfit Minded. And yeah, have you seen any new movies lately? 'Cause I just got
Why?
back from one, and I'm curious if you've seen it.
What was it? What was it?
I guess it's not that new anymore, but I finally watched the new Ghostbusters movie. Did you
Yep,
see that one?
that's the one I wanted to take your temperature on too. I feel like
All
it was a
right.
really divisive movie. A lot
Yes.
of people I know were like, "It's the best thing ever," and then other people were like, "What a joke." So I
Yeah.
can't. I'm not sure. What did you think?
I'm on the negative side, honestly, and I feel so bad, honestly, because I'm just like, am I just to that point now where I'm just like overly cynical of everything, because I've seen so many movies, but
It's
like,
hard not to be sometimes.
I just like, I was trying to figure, I'm like, it's like the same thing. I have a problem with like the Marvel formula being like the same every time. And I'm
Yep,
just like, I think I'm just over the soft reboot with IP. Like, it's so lazy. And I was
it
just
really is.
incredibly, like, I would
This
say
one
the
in
first half of
particular.
it, I actually was enjoying, like, how different it was. It seemed like it was going, like, the
Mm-hmm.
direction.
Mm-hmm.
And like, with McKenna Grace, she was like the saving grace, like, no pun intended, of the film for me, because I think that character was like, she just killed that role, like, as the new
Yes.
Egon or whatever. And like, so
Mm-hmm.
that she did a great job with that. I think everything else was like, we're all wet blanket characters. I mean, there's literally a kid named Podcast, and it was just
Dude,
like,
I'm
we
so
couldn't even give
angry.
this kid a name.
Seriously. Next level, like racism or something. It just seems so weird that they're like, you know what? We're just gonna not do it. And I think he was the saving grace for me. I love McKenna Grace, but I really liked that kid, and I'm
He
like,
was
fuck, he doesn't even have a name.
he did good in that role too, but that just bothered me. Where it was like, again, it's like, am I being overly cynical, or like, did the screenwriters just not give a shit to give him even a basic name? like
Seriously.
like his profession is his name, or like what he likes to do. Like, oh, he likes doing podcasts, so we'll just have him call himself Podcast. Like, who does that? Like, I don't like,
Well,
what kid would do
especially
that?
Well, especially because you nailed it. It's what a lazy screenwriting ploy. Like, why not just give him a name like any human being deserves? And then you can have people shorthand call him podcast because they've forgotten his name in the writing. There's plenty of human ways to deal with a kid whose character's into being a podcaster when you're not like thinking it's original to do that.
Yeah, it was. I mean, there was a lot of questionable choices, and I don't want to spoil, the very end, but like the third act is when I was kind of in the middle of like,
Mm-hmm.
there's some stuff working here for me.
Yep.
Like, visually, I think it's like pretty distinct. Like, it looks pretty good, and
Yep.
McKenna Grace, like I said, everything else, I'm kind of like not on board with the cheap nostalgia-ness of it. And then
Yep.
the third act, I went the other way. Like, I just was like, oh no, oh
Yeah.
no.
Dude, so inappropriate,
Thank
so
you, because
bad.
there's some people, like, I would say, like Edwin, and like, the critic circle, like that, like around Ed, they it all worked for them, and I just was
Yeah,
like, I don't know. I felt very gross. I felt very
same.
gross at the
Disgusting.
end, and I could not like respect it. And it was funny because it felt like they were trying to like market this to like kids, and these kids behind me in the theater could not give a shit about this movie.
Yeah.
They were so bored, they were running
Yep.
around. And I was like, I don't know. Like, it's almost, yeah, it's like that hard thing of like, they want to put in all this nostalgia for fans of the original, but also like
Hmm.
be like, sanitize it to be like a kid friendly franchise
Yes.
at the same time. And you know, I don't know. Like I said,
I
it was
mean,
there's some stuff that's cool, but it's just, Ivan Reitman. or what's is that who's the son? Is that what's his son's name that did
Jason.
this?
Jason's the
Jason
son.
Reitman. Yeah, and
Hmm.
I'm not even like I like a lot of his movies, but he makes those like
Yeah.
quirky indies, and it's like the same thing with Marvel. I think that's why I thought of that at first too, because Marvel
Mm.
does the same shit of let's take quirky indie director
Yep.
who does these small, low budget movies with a lot of personality, like of their personality in it, and let's give them like $100 million to make, this huge, big budget CGI mess, and I'm like, what is the logic on that? I never understand it. Like, why?
Seriously.
He's
Yeah.
not,
Yeah.
it rarely like okay, sometimes it works and it pays off, but I just am more baffled all the time when I'm like, yeah, I don't understand why, if you want to understand why the movie didn't work, I'd say a large part of it is because of that. It's like, yeah, these guys clearly, like, even with Shang-Chi, it's like, yeah, Daniel Cretton, he makes these really amazing dramas, and then it's like
Hmm.
Shang-Chi, like this huge multi-continental martial arts movie. And it's like,
Yep.
yeah, maybe maybe we shouldn't have asked that guy to do that. I don't know. But
I mean,
I know I'm in the
I can't
minority in a
tell.
lot of this stuff. Yeah, it's
No.
weird.
I feel like I see exactly where you're coming from, because this is the debate that I had with my partner. Like he's like, I just don't understand like what even happened in that. What was the story? What
Yes.
are we doing? And I was like, oh, right, because I know the first one and the second one so well, I
Hmm.
was able to see that they basically just lifted pretty much everything. Like almost every
And
encounter in this movie is
no, and
straight
not
lifted.
to be clear, like I love the first one. Like I watched it
Same.
a ton as a kid. Second one, even the second one too, I would say. Like those, so I didn't
Yeah.
even rewatch. I didn't even rewatch because I remember them. They're so strong in my memory still. And
Yep.
yeah, it's like that thing of like, yeah, we want to be slick and do all these callbacks or whatever for like the OG fans. And it's like,
Hmm.
yeah, but you know, especially in like
Lazy.
there were some for like I said at first that were like, okay, that's kind of cool. It's kind of like subtle. And the third act, it was like they couldn't think of an ending, so it's like we're gonna do the same villain, the same plot, the same creatures, the same, and it's like,
Yeah.
really, we're gonna just do everything again the same.
I mean,
Oh man.
it felt like so much got cut out of it to me, because there was a lot in there too that like completely went unanswered. It's like, first of all,
Yeah.
who is this woman's mother, right? Like who had a kid with Egon, and why wasn't it the receptionist? She was in love with him for two movies. They were so clearly building something together.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? I know
Yeah,
she and
exactly.
Rick Moranis also had some sort of thing, but like there were so many other questions where I was like, I want those answers, not just the same thing I saw before. But I'm with
Can I tell
you.
you my hot take too? Like I was
Yeah.
honestly, I walked out of it and I was like, I know this was a response to the 2016. It's like almost like this is the rise of Skywalker to
Yeah.
The Last Jedi.
Yep.
I'm like, 2016 is The Last Jedi. I might prefer 2016 to this one.
Yeah. Yeah.
I
I
didn't
mean,
think it was that bad when it came out. I remember I
same.
avoided. It was the same thing with Last Jedi. I was so grossed out by the fandom and the
Mm-hmm.
clear just like sexism like of the fan. I just avoided it. I just did not see it.
Yep.
I'm like, I don't even want to talk about it. Like this is like really disgusting to me.
Yeah.
And I waited like years until it was like I think like I had like a digital copy of it or something like that, and then I just watched it and
Mm-hmm.
I was like, that wasn't worth that much debate like back then. I remember watching it, like
Word.
it was fine. Like there's
Mm-hmm.
some CGI and again villain problems in that, but like I respect originality and I like that's why that's why when we were talking on here before, like Eternals, I would say is my favorite MCU movie of the year because it's like that's the
Mm-hmm.
most different. That's like It felt like
Yeah.
Chloe Zhao, had her Oscar, and they were like, "Whatever you want to do, like we will do it." Like it felt very different than say some of these other directors that they just stepped in and they're like, "All right, we're gonna do our Marvel formula." Like
Yep.
here you go. Well, you're just a plug-in player basically,
It's
which I
true.
feel like a lot of the time, and so. Yeah, I don't, and it's like, there's two post-credit scenes. It's like, we're really gonna do the Marvel thing with this too? Like that's the other thing that's marvelly about it. Is like we're gonna set up a
Yep.
sequel. We're gonna set up some.
Yeah. I mean, it was so clearly a different direction to go in terms of like what's behind the filmmaking. The originals are comedies that have some sci-fi in them. And, the reboot is really more about like children's sci-fi comedy, which is a different genre. Like they're
Hmm.
related, but they're different. And it was interesting how they tried to mix those two things. But I think unless you are just in the mood for like bright colors and nostalgia and like nothing really more, then this works for you. But if you were hoping for them to like do something a little bit more original or at least try something
Yeah,
like the 2016 one, then you weren't going to get anything because the areas
yeah,
where they set themselves up to do something new, they just ignored. Like
and
whatever
I think it's
happened.
worth mentioning
Yep.
in both cases of Eternals and in the 2016, made by
Hmm.
female voices. Like the cast, Ghostbusters
Yep.
2016 was all female. Eternals made by a female filmmaker, and it's like I don't think that's like a stretch to be like, yeah, there's something to that. Like, why do the female filmmakers get shit on more than
Yeah.
the average dudes that come into this thing? Like,
So
I have
true.
no shame in saying that. Like,
It's true. It's true. I
doesn't
can't
mean you
remember
have to like
who.
praise them because of that. But I'm
Right.
just saying, like, it feels different. They feel different, and just for me, like, there's some that even Birds of Prey. I'm still defending Birds of
Yes.
Prey
Oh,
this
I
much
love Birds
time
of Prey.
later, and I'm like
Hmm.
against these like shitty dudes. And a lot of the time, I want to say like, bro, do you just like hate women? Like sometimes I just be like
Yeah.
saying that like
Yeah.
outright, like, do you just hate women because
I mean, it's
why are you
true.
this passionate about? I do not even feel that passionately about any of these movies, but I find myself just defending these movies a lot of the time because of that. It's weird. We're in a weird
No, no.
fandom, toxic fandom time.
We are. I mean, that is the tightrope that filmmakers are walking. And I think maybe because some female directors just have this understanding that like this is the price they pay. They're entering this dominated world,
Hmm.
and part of it is sort of like dealing with the mud that people are going to sling. But I think at the very least, with time, people can go back and appreciate it. Like the average viewer
Hmm.
can't be so swayed by the troll a couple years later because I've been defending Ghostbusters 2016 since 2016, and people are turning around on it. Everybody's starting to turn
Okay,
around on
see,
it.
yeah, I didn't know that makes sense, and I feel like time is the only thing that will help some of these movies
Totally.
that get shit on at the time because they will hold up a lot better. I mean, that's Paul, what's his name? Paul Feig that did the
Yep.
Ghostbusters, and like he's a comedic like genius. Like,
Yeah, it's
so I'm
true.
like
It's like he's,
we're talking about Bridesmaids here. We're talking about The Office. Like, come on
yes.
now.
Well, that's the thing too,
So
is that I feel like female driven comedies where like the females lead, they're often more subtle. And I think sometimes that turns people off too, because if they try
dude,
to
I
be
just
too
bought Bad
loud,
Moms on
oh,
Blu-ray. I love the
yes.
Bad Moms franchise.
It's such a good franchise. But like, you know what I mean? There are these subtle jokes that women bring
Yeah.
forward. And sometimes I think the average audience or like some of these more misogynistic bros, like they just don't like that they have to think about it or hang out a little bit longer to pick up a joke. They just want to know what's going
Hmm.
on, feel like they know everything about this intellectual property. So you're going to fuck it up. Like they don't like
Hmm.
surprises. They want to know everything. And
That's
you
true.
can't make a movie for fans who want to know everything already. That's like why I am kind of out on Marvel
It's just
altogether. Like
so bare minimum. It's so
I
bare
can't do
minimum, and I could
homework.
just feel it. And it's like, yeah,
Yeah. It's like, why am I
so
doing the extra work for your movie? That's not fair.
yeah. exactly. And then real quick, because we do have to start this episode, but Resident
Yes,
Evil. I
but
know
go
you
for
saw
it.
Resident Evil after last
Fuck
week's
yeah.
episode. Okay, what just quick thoughts?
Great.
'Cause
Loved it.
I
Had
haven't
a
seen it
super
yet.
fun time. Super fun
Okay.
time. Barely a story, but after you explained to me that, this rendition was trying to do more of the game,
Like
that like
horror, it's
totally
more
clicked.
horror-ish.
Yeah,
It
it
feels like more
really
of a horror
worked.
movie, right? Okay.
Yeah, it really vibed on like legit jumps. Like I jumped several times and I was like, damn, I can't believe how scary this movie ended up being, even though it's also still a little bit like, phoned in story wise. The gore and the filmmaking is there. It's just it's like we talked about last week. It's hard when you
Yeah.
don't have a Michelle Rodriguez or like a Mila Jovovich like really holding it to the ground, you know?
Yeah, it seemed like from the trailer that was going to be the week. Like if I
Mm,
had to critique just from the trailer, I was like, yeah, the casting seems questionable.
yep, seems a little
And
CW.
yep, and the actors, yeah, they're giving off the CW vibe exactly. Couldn't have said it better. All right,
It was
let's
fun.
get
It was
talking
definitely
about
fun.
Mission Impossible though, because I
Yeah.
cannot wait.
Same.
uh,
Okay.
so yeah,
All
let's get
right.
started on this. Today we're talking about our first Brian DePalma film, the 1996 spy movie, Mission Impossible. Um,
Yes.
yeah, what's it about, Shani B?
Well, it is an espionage tale within a tale. It's about an American agent who is under false suspicion of disloyalty and is out to kind of discover and expose who the real mole is in his organization. And it's jam packed full of great actors and
Hell yeah!
one of my all time favorite movies, like in general. What about you? Are you a fan of this movie?
So I have like this is like one thing like me and Edwin like we talk about like franchises and disagree a
Yep.
lot of times. So this is one where we kind of fall on opposite ends on in that the first one is his favorite, and
Mm-hmm.
I'd always remembered like liking the first one but thinking that they improved on it in the sequels, like
Right.
like just because they're more action packed, they're more stunt oriented now.
Yeah.
um but I don't think I necessarily appreciated the filmmaking of it and the Brian De Palma of it until like
Mm.
now being like a film, like having a degree in film basically
Yep.
now, and becoming a huge Brian De Palma head. This time
Yes.
around, I gotta say, like a lot of that stuff stuck out to me a lot more, in which we'll talk about like when we get to the filmmaking aspects of it. Still
Mm-hmm.
think the third act. I think that was like I think that's where my opinion is still pretty strong on it. Where I think it kind of falls apart in the third act, especially, and where in the other movies that's like where the you get the huge set pieces or whatever, and in this one it's like
Mm-hmm.
it's on a train. It's like there's some cool stuff on it, but like the
Yeah, it's muted.
CGI, it's pretty, yeah, it's pretty small stakes, and but I know that's what some people like about it. So, but yeah, it's
Yeah.
definitely cool to see where the franchise started. I think
Yep.
it's like I think if you look at it in context with the whole, there's like seven movies now. I think six or seven Mission Impossible
Mm-hmm.
movies. I think it's a
Across
great place to
decades.
start. Great place to start. You know what I mean? Like it was the perfect place to bring the IP of the TV show to a big screen. And so I do appreciate it for that. But yeah, what about
Well,
you?
and
Like,
it gave
is this
it
like your favorite one, or where do you stand on that?
I break the franchise up into like chapters, I guess. So for like first chapter, I think of the first two films as the where this franchise begins. And the reason I like this one so much is because I feel like it poises the film to be able to go to those places in the future. It's like comes
Mm,
out so fucking strong and with such an exciting, charismatic frontman that even though number two is like a little bit confusing for some people and they don't all come to it, by three, it's like, here we go into chapter two, where like these movies are full on this kind of action movie that's a little bit more fun and upbeat. And the first two are trying to figure out where that is. So I feel like they just can't really be included. It's like they really feel like a different
Yeah.
franchise, even though Tom Cruise kills it and he's in all seven.
And you couldn't get more different filmmakers than De Palma doing the first one and then John Woo doing the second one. Couldn't get
Seriously.
like more polar opposite. Like by the time we get to two, we're on full on action movie mode. You know what I mean? It's like even they knew it's like we got to up the action in this franchise.
Totally, totally. I mean, I think that's because by the end of this movie, they've been raising the stakes on the action. They sort of start in this place where you can tell that it's hyper controlled. They've set up the whole
Yeah.
scene in the open of this film, they control every element of it. And by the end, it's like this fool can't control anything. He's on a moving train now. You know what I
And
mean?
that's what
Like,
I like about this one. I think is that because I was in, not to step on the research part, but like
mm,
the whole movie, Ethan Hunt does not really use a gun. There's a scene where
nope,
he like carries it and like loads it up, but never shoots anybody. This is not like a James Bond movie in that
nope.
respect. Like there's chases and stuff like that, but I like that it's just cloak and dagger. It's more heist. There's some heist stuff in it. Like it's
Mm-hmm,
very like neo noir. I actually that's what I like about this entry, like compared to the
mm-hmm.
other ones, because then you just get straight up like you got J.J. Abrams doing one, and then Christopher
Yes.
McQuarrie
Yep.
has done like a couple of them, I think. So, and then
Exactly.
those are action filmmakers, and De Palma is just he's more interested in the suspense and like
Mm-hmm.
uh, you know the train sequence. It's like yeah, he also has another suspenseful train station sequence in Untouchables.
Yeah.
The guy loves the train station.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's like he got to do a lot of things in this film he's good at. And,
Yeah.
him bringing his flourishes to it just elevate, what was probably much sillier on TV. I'm sure that if this movie came out too campy, then by the time we got to seven, it would be, it'd be fast seven. But instead, we
Hmm.
kind of start super grounded and we keep thinking about how to stay on the ground. We have Tom Cruise like never becoming campy, even, when this movie has to go to extremes. He's still fucking doing the stunts for real. And I just feel like that starts in the grounded place where he started this, because this has to be like one of his early producing gigs, right?
For Cruise,
Yeah, like as the
yeah,
producer and the lead
yeah,
actor, like
exactly.
it has
I
to be
noticed that
early.
too.
Yeah.
Yeah,
And I was like,
and I was gonna
damn.
say, yeah, this is a weird De Palma movie too, if you think about it, because it's like more big budget, but like I know at the
Mm-hmm.
time this was like a very he was kind of coming off of his success in the 70s and 80s, and it was kind of being like, is De Palma, is he done? Like is he done
Mm-hmm.
being successful? And like the fact that this was a hit. I think there was like a lot of behind the scenes like controversy because this was like, how do we make this from the TV show? And like I think there was some script issues at the time with like De Palma and the screenwriters.
Mm-hmm.
But like I said, I think there's a pretty good balance, especially in like the first like two-thirds of the movie, that like it's clearly De Palma. It's clearly like his interests, probably not as like
Yep.
perverse as
Mm-hmm.
his movies usually tend to be, but like that's also probably a good thing.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's probably this
Accurate.
story didn't need that. Didn't need that.
It's true. It's sort of like even
Yeah.
that inadvertently sets us up to be able to have the interesting kind of James Bond style romances Ethan Hunt will have, while also the very grounded, deep love he'll hold for Michelle Monaghan. Like
Yeah.
there's just
And we could
so
talk
many
about some of the
places this
plot
guy will
holes here,
go.
but I do
I
agree
want
with you
to.
about the the age difference between John
Uh,
Voight, yeah, and like
and
his love interest in it. And it's like and you know what's even weirder to me is I was like, she almost is like a Angelina Jolie-ish
yeah,
looking, you know what I mean? She has that like
yeah,
very distinct look with like the plump lips and like kind of like the brown
yep.
hair. And I'm just like, okay, this is like weird on so many levels.
It,
Like this is just
especially Yeah, especially because John Voight like already comes off a little bit weird in the '90s, and then he like says having tasted the goods, in the end there.
Oh
And it's
God, that
just
was such a weird line. Yeah, I was like,
disgusting, dude. The
and
writing
like it
is
cuts to her. It cuts
different.
to her when he says that, and she's almost like, "You, like, bro."
Yeah. She's like, oh, thanks. Yikes. But yeah,
Oh my
it
God.
is interesting that the age difference there, because it doesn't bother me between Vanessa Redgrave and Tom Cruise. I like love their sort of uh
That was
you know
interesting. I like because
sexual
it was
tension or whatever.
yeah, it's like that. That was almost James Bond to me too, though, where it's like the femme fatale. Like, does she really like him, or is she just using
Yes.
him for information or to like be in? We find out at the end like that it was like kind of a setup, but I think even in their performances, like this time around, I knew that going into it.
Hmm.
And that's kind of the fun too, is like you get to see if they like, tell or like their tells or and I think
Right.
in that sense, like you can tell that Cruz is kind of skeptical of it, well, because she's almost like throwing herself at him in a
Yeah.
way, and he's kind of like, "All right, bro, your husband just died." Like
Yeah.
something fishy. She plays it, I think, too much, where it's like, yeah, it's kind of obvious that but they do some cool stuff with the Voight thing that even like, rewatching it to see if that like to hide that he's the villain. And I kind of forgot that they even like reveal that like early
Yes.
before like the third act train stuff gets going. Like
Well,
it's a twist, but it's
yes.
pretty early on to what you would expect from like a third act twist. Because
Well,
like you
it's
go into that action scene at the end like knowing that he's the bad.
yep, yep. But I guess like
Uh,
that's also a total De Palma move to be like, well, this was like 30 stories going on at once. So I'll close one out because the better part of that story hasn't happened yet, and we'll do that. It's like
yeah.
whether or not John Voight was the mole, there's like other things at play now. And so it
Hmm.
is interesting to kind of see how like in espionage stories, it's like information is so important, but it's also sometimes totally useless, right? Like,
Hmm.
I love that scene where John Voight is trying his best to convince him that he is not the bad guy, and Ethan's like going with it while
Because
visually totally
we know
knowing.
as an audience. I mean, like
Yep.
since he says it at the end too. Like I knew from the Drake Hotel with the
Hmm.
book. Like that's when we, the audience, if you're paying attention, are like, oh, it's John Voight.
Yep.
Like
Yep.
they roast him pretty openly at the beginning for like staying at these cushy hotels.
Yep.
So they make kind of a point of it to be like, yeah, it's him. And you sit there while he's like clearly lying to Cruz, but like the reenactments of Cruz thinking about what had happened, but then he's also
Yes.
not sure if the girl had something to do with it. So he's like, no, 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 he couldn't have acted alone. Like he's trying. You're seeing his thought
Yes.
process. Like that was cool to me that you don't really
Yep.
see that in movies. People thinking and then them like playing out like that. So, and then even Renault, like him being the guy who knifes the other person
Yes.
because they make a huge deal about the knife in the heist scene
Yep.
that plays such a big part in that. So it all comes together. It all comes together, which I like about it. And what else?
It's
Like
true.
any other like nitpicks before we get
I
into
mean,
what we love about it?
I feel like there's a fair amount of yada yadas that go down here because
Yeah.
the the one thing that I love about this is, to me, this one has the most memorable like one-liners. I feel like there are so many lines Tom
Mm,
Cruise says in this one that always stick with me because as they go on, the writing is like less kitschy. It's like it is more grounded, it is more matter of fact and like about what we're doing and about the relationships. And I
yeah.
feel like in this one, they just yada yada that like, well, we were able to steal that shit and get out of Langley like pretty easy,
Well, even
all of
yeah,
this stuff
even the
isn't
opening
as hard
credits.
as it seems.
The
Go ahead.
opening credits gives away stuff, kind of like if it's
Yeah.
very fast cutting. So like you could
Hmm.
tell like probably the producers were like, bro, you can't like just give away some of these plot points. But they
But it
yeah,
makes me think
if you
of,
look closely, you can see
yep.
like the setup at the beginning. You can see like some of the reveals if you're paying close enough
Yes.
attention.
I mean, like, that's also
Yeah.
like my kind of vibe. You know, I'm the kind of movie nerd that's like, I am looking at the weird detail that's in the back of this screen, and I'm wondering whether or not you thought about it. You know, like, that's
Yeah.
exactly how I like to watch a movie, which is one of the reasons why I love De Palma, because I think he does think about it. And this
Hmm.
movie is a good example of how I think he also likes to wave something in your face to see if you saw it. You know what I mean?
Yeah. I agree with your like about the lines too though. Like I always like at the end though, like even though like again the third act is kind of the weakest part for me, like the red light, green light, and then like
Nothing
exploding the
better.
helicopter. I'm like, I'm
Nothing
always
better.
every time, fuck yeah.
Dude,
Red light,
hasta
green light.
lasagna. Yes.
Oh yeah.
Don't get any on you.
Does it at the
It's so
restaurant
good.
too. Like that's the second time he uses the gum. It's so simple, but like never gets old. It still works the second time too. Like he does it in the helicopter.
Yep. Yep. And it's sort of like that's what you kind of come to expect, I guess, to be possible in this franchise is that like we don't maybe have all of the gadgets figured out, but that there's this desire to do more action, to have big explosions and to have big sequences. It's just sort of like that is something I thought about this time around that like that's not necessarily like where De Palma's strength is. You know, his
Yeah.
strengths are in the suspense, are in, you know, the sensuality, are in more of the noir aspects, and that's something I love about this. But the
Hmm.
action piece, it's like I feel like De
You can
Palma
tell
walks
he's
too
not
slow
interested
to
in it.
do it.
You can tell he's
Exactly.
not at all interested in the action of it. Like the third
Nope.
act is almost like they were like, "Bro, we need like a helicopter chase or whatever," and he's like, "Fine, I guess." Like,
Yep, yep. He was like, okay, cool. Just do it on this one day where I won't be there. The second unit
throw
director's
you
got
guys a
it.
bone.
But you know, like it is interesting because foundationally, that's kind of why I think this franchise is standing, is that Tom Cruise has always kept it grounded and emotional, you know, maybe not
Mhm.
as volatilely emotional, like in this one where he's like, you know, Jim's dead, like screaming.
I like that
It's
scene
it's
though.
too
Like I,
good.
I I like when because Cruz he can play that kind of unhinged, like pretty
Yeah.
well. I think like and so when he's
Yep.
being put under the microscope and he kind of is seeing again you can see his thought process like in his performance, at least I can, which
Yep.
I think that makes it a good performance because you can see him being like, oh, there I'm being
Yep.
set up, like you can
Yeah.
like especially on rewatch when you know like that, you know, that I think that they kind of make him like the de facto villain, the guy that's like coming in to arrest Ethan
Yep.
for yeah, and so
Kittredge.
yeah, yeah, Kittredge. So the whole time you're just like, he's like thinking like, oh, I'm getting set up. Like they're trying to take me in. Like that's why there's all these
Mm-hmm.
agents here, and I have to like find a way out of this. Like there's nothing really like that to say that, but his performance and like yeah, him snapping
Exactly.
on them too. Like everyone's dead.
Mm-hmm.
Everyone's
Exactly.
dead.
Yeah, it's sort of like we get to grow up with Ethan in an interesting way, where like he goes from sort of like a little bit younger, more volatile guy trying to survive this insane world of espionage to, you know, the man that we now have in Fallout who's like, I just gotta fucking do this shit. Like, I don't really yell at anybody anymore. I just like handle my business and get it done.
Time for
And
that.
it's just
No
kind
time
of
for
cool
that.
to know, yeah, it's just kind of cool to be able to go through that range with him. You know, like
Like even when the girl like makes it out from the beginning, he thinks everyone's dead, and he kind of like, you know, pins her to the wall and is like interrogating her, and you're like, you know what, like all of his team did die, you know what I mean? So it's like,
mm-hmm,
and he's being blamed for it, so you understand his frustration and like, you know, where were you?
totally.
Like how, you were in the car, I saw you in the car, like.
Yep.
And he was right. He was right. She ended up being in on it. So, you know, he was right to question her like that.
Yeah, I mean, I was watching it this time thinking like, you know, how much of this is something that he also got through luck or orchestrated too because, you know, like when Claire brings in the professional, like the professional was also working with John Voight,
Hmm.
right? Like
Yeah.
so did Ethan have
Jean
that?
Renault. I think that's
Yeah,
his
like
name,
did
Jean
Ethan
Renault. Yeah.
see that knife and kind of know what that knife was? Because when they're doing these
Well,
meetings, when they're like seeing
in
each other, some
the
of these details are there.
in that John Voight sit down when he catches up with him again, um, when it shows like his thought process, he knows they got stabbed. I think because he finds her, and then she's been stabbed, and you just see the hand and the knife going through. But I don't think he would
Yep.
have seen that. I just think he's kind of filling in that blank that like she was stabbed, and this guy had a knife. Like again, he's
Yep.
like
Yep.
you can see the wheels turning and him trying to fill
It's
in those
true.
blanks. But I mean, for us as the audience, I think they spell it out pretty clear, like that's the same knife. It's a long black knife, like pretty distinct knife.
Yep, looks
Yeah.
exactly the same. And again, I love the details and the Easter eggs. This movie is like a proper movie, complete with the filmmaking and the action and the music and
Hmm.
the visuals. I also love the color. It's sort of like flat but bright at the same time, like washed out,
Yeah.
and there's a little bit of Vaseline here and there, but
Yeah.
also flat, right? Like nothing over the top.
Yeah. No, I noticed that this time as well. Like I agree, like especially in that opening sequence, or like if we're talking about filmmaking stuff, like I still
Hmm.
think, I mean, it's pretty long. Like it's not even I say opening sequence, like it lasts for like the first 20-30 minutes of the movie. It's like
Yeah.
all this setup of, you meet the team and we're on this mission like immediately, and like
Yep.
you think like this is going to be the whole movie is this team, and they pull the rug up from under us, and the whole team fucking, I mean, even Emilio Estevez, like I think that
Dude.
probably hasn't held up as well necessarily because like he was like a huge star at the time, so for them
Right.
to kill him off, it's like the Scream thing with Drew Barrymore. It's like holy shit, like
Yeah.
he's the first one to be like to get off,
And they
and you're like, wait, if they kill him, like no one is safe.
and they set you up several
Yeah,
times with him like moving around the elevator, not afraid of it or feeling in danger at all, only to like be
yeah,
slain by the elevator. Because like that's one of my favorite kills. This movie also has
yeah.
more gore in it than you think, because like you can
Oh,
see
that
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 shaft
elevator
going
kill,
in.
to his face.
Yeah.
Yeah, Rob Bottin, the legend, Rob Bottin.
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
Yep, it's so good. And that first opening shot is like a guy watching people on TV that he is secretly recording, and it just says Kiev. So like there literally is
Yeah.
nothing other than, a straight up De Palma shot with a title sequence, and we kind of have to figure it out. But then they very quickly explain it to us again because we start a mission right away too. Like that's
I
something
think
I
it's
love about
it's
this
it's
movie
just
as well, that
perfectly
weird
executed.
urgency.
It's
Yeah.
perfectly executed. Like you meet them just enough. You
Yep.
like the fact that like they all have their own thing that they're doing. You see like her spray. You mark the target, and then cruising
Yep.
her like in the alley. I love the look of like when they're in the alley. It's very like old school noir.
Yep.
They're like in this like weird alley like in Kiev, and
Yep.
Tom Cruise just with this girl like pinning the girl. He's just like, do we abort, or like they're in that weird
Yep.
like,
Yeah, they're like sort of
clearly
hooking
this
up,
is
but not
falling. Yeah,
really.
this is falling through, and he has to, which is Ethan Hunt does, and like every installment is like I have to make my own call. Like I can't just listen to the
That's
abort. Like
right.
I'm gonna follow through with the mission, and clearly he doesn't know that he's like a pawn in this whole thing. But that's De Palma. That's his
Yep.
bag. Is like someone that's in over their head. John Travolta in Blowout. Like I'm in over my head,
Yes.
but let me investigate this murder. Like go after this serial killer anyway. And it's like you don't have any reason to do that. But, like I know you want to help out, but it's like, bro, this is gonna be tragic for you, and it
Yep.
most of just same thing with Dress to Kill. Like a lot of his protagonists,
Yes.
I would say especially guy protagonists,
Mm-hmm.
are in over their heads, and they fall into the conspiracy of the film.
Yep.
And yeah, I just like that he's not afraid to do that. Like he's like, I'm gonna that's what makes his movies interesting. It's usually a guy that's caught in a web of conspiracy, and that's perfect for a spy film. So yeah, the
Yes.
opening is that's just my favorite sequence of I know the most iconic is like the Langley,
Oh,
breaking in, and I mean that's a classic. It's still iconic. It's still, has aged remarkably well. But the opening is just De Palma and just my shit. Like,
yep,
it's
yep,
like if you appreciate De Palma, you can see his work there, his style, the split
yep.
diopter shots, the it's just really great. I don't know.
God, yes,
I
the
love that.
amazing POVs, the
First
fantastic
person,
upward
yes,
angles, like
exactly.
just making sure that we are kind of just as confused or disoriented as Ethan in certain situations where he is feeling that. And I think
Exactly.
even in, the opening sequences and the Langley stuff, there's some amazing extreme close-ups where you're like, what's going to happen? What's going on? It's like, even though I've seen
Yeah.
it, I'm sort of like still waiting for this moment I know is coming. And
The
there's just something
filmmaking is
interesting
so
about
good
that
though.
suspense. Yeah.
The filmmaking is so good that, like you said, you feel like you're like caught up in it, even though you know what's
Mm-hmm.
happening. It's like you said, with the angles, the dramatic angles, the Dutch angles, and the extreme
Yep.
close-ups, the first person, camera work. Like,
Oh,
it's just
so
everything
good.
is elevating what could be just like a basic setup for a movie from someone else, but
Mm-hmm.
De Palma just that you can just tell like that it almost was like, yeah, that probably was his favorite sequence to film. If I had to
Mm-hmm.
guess, if I had to venture a guess about what was his favorite stuff, like that's the most De Palma.
Totally.
It's got like an unseen killer, an unseen killer doing the stabbing and stuff, and
Yep.
with Voight, all you see is hands and the silencer. Like, that's like a De Palma thing, is gloved, hands killing and not seeing the killer. Like, yeah, it's just
Yeah.
really great
Yeah.
stuff.
Being forced to watch also, right? Like Ethan is
Yeah.
forced to watch his whole team die, not just have this
Hmm.
awareness. Like he's fucking catching everybody right as they're dying. And
Exactly. He's too
that is
late.
another thing. Yeah, that's another one of his things he likes to put his characters into the place of, is sort of
Hmm.
like being forced into this situation where they're over their head, where like they didn't want to see what they saw, didn't want to be where they were, and that doesn't really matter. They're going to get it
I always
anyway.
forget too. I always forget too. They have. I mean, the very, very opening of the film is like them getting information from this guy and like cruising like the mask,
Yeah.
and them set like there's a whole set, and it's like a movie within a movie.
Yep.
Like where the props and the sets get carried off, and like he takes off the mask, and they're like,
So good.
all right, we did everything. And it's like, that's something they do in like to this day in like the new Mission Impossible movies. Like, I forgot that it's present in the first one. And
Yep.
I mean, the mask reveals get kind of goofy, I gotta say. Like, it's something they fall back on a lot of Mission Impossibles, and it's
Mm-hmm.
sometimes it works for me, other times it just gets a little too ridiculous even for me. But
Totally.
I
It's got
like
to be
that
well
first
played.
one. I think that first one is good, and even the John Voight one at the
Mm-hmm.
end, it's like, but like once you get to like the voice enhancers and stuff, like it gets pretty.
I love that
That's when
shit
it gets
though.
like, yeah, it's true. It's true,
But that
but
is when it sort of turns into the next chapter of like being these high octane action films that like straight up Tom Cruise kind of invented, because he sort of took the buddy comedy action stuff and brought Ving
Mhm.
Rhames with him, but he kept it on the ground, like where it started, in more dramatic
Yeah.
spaces where the reality of who these guys are has always been present too, and the color changes. I feel like by the time we get to
Yeah.
some of like J.J. Abrams is so bright colored. It's like orange and red and so
The
blue. It's amazing.
lens
Yeah,
flares
yeah.
everywhere. Yeah.
It is
It's funny
interesting.
too though, because like Tom Cruise is like infamously short, and so I'm like, I wonder if like that's why when he's John Voight, they have him like super far, like in the corner sitting down, because it's like she'd probably see him and being like, "Wait, you're not John Voight." Like, my guy's like
Probably.
6 foot plus, like, but they kind of do that, like try and hide it. He doesn't talk in this one. There's no voice enhancers in this
Right.
one, so I think they can get away with it a little easier, But yeah, that's they still do that. There's like the in the last Mission Impossible, they have the whole like CNN like setup,
Yes.
like fake out. And in Mission Impossible 3, they have like him dressing up as Philip Seymour Hoffman and that whole
Best.
thing. And it's so yeah, it's like it's become a staple of the franchise, and it's star tier.
Yeah, hell yeah. Hell yeah.
Um,
So, uh, as we get near the end, I don't want to miss our new categories
yeah.
that I'm really excited to kind of like, I guess, talk a little bit more about them because we've touched on them. But yeah, like for you, which stunt do you feel like accomplishes the most? This is a stretch for De Palma regardless. So what do you think is maybe your favorite stunt?
Um, I love the opening set piece. Like I said, that's still my favorite sequence. But
Right.
I went with the boring answer. It still has to be like him hanging at Langley, like when Renault drops him almost to the floor, and it's like him trying to balance his body and not hit the floor. Like that's like in camera, and
Hmm.
that was in one of the research is they said that he kept hitting his head on the floor because
Yeah.
he couldn't keep straight. And so it's like you can see that when that
Yeah.
scene happens, it's like he literally has to like flex his body upwards, like
Yep.
to not hit the floor. And it's very impressive that still like he films that like straight with the floor, very low angle. And so yeah, I think that's an iconic scene for a reason, and it's been copied and like parodied to death. But
Yes, it has.
I think people still forget that that's like a great stunt, and he would like obviously they outdo like in every movie is a crazier and crazier crew stunt where he's like
Hmm.
just putting his body at risk.
Yep.
But this was the start of it. Like that's if we're gonna pick one stunt in the movie and be like that's where he gets that kind of inspiration from, I think it has to be Langley. But yeah, what
Totally.
about you? What's your favorite stunt?
Well, it's hard to pick because I think the stunts that exist in this are pretty great. I
Yeah.
love the train sequence at the end, but it's definitely a lot more about the CG and me loving how insane it is after a movie that was so muted. But I think my favorite stunt is the magic trick that Tom Cruise does with the floppy disk.
Oh, dude, I didn't even see you wrote that. That was like honestly, I was gonna mention that like an honorable mention that because he actually did that in camera.
It it's so
Yeah.
hard to see, and it legit looks like magic, and it's just such a good scene because Ving Rhames, having observed it, he is sort of like, so you did let him have it, and just that personal moment that they have is great. So I just,
Or it was the
for the
opposite.
stunt, I had to go with it.
Yeah, like you said, yeah, he did let him. He was faking like he had the right disc the whole time, but Renault did actually
Yeah.
have the floppy disk, which I love. It's like that's part of being a spy is basically you have to lie through your teeth and like convincingly, at that lie. And so like that whole scene is just basically to embarrass Renault, but
Yep.
he also Renault had the right one.
Yeah, he had to.
So
It was his only
yeah,
play,
so
you know?
I had remembered that like from whenever I watched it before, but it was again, it's amazing. This movie holds up on rewatch because even when you know the reveals,
Yes.
you can just sit there and enjoy Cruise's performance in that scene because he has to
Hmm.
sell it that he believes that he has. I would never let you have the knock list.
Yeah, yeah, come on.
And we know as an audience like, oh, but you did though. But and then he's being so cheeky about it too. He's like really taking the piss, like did I
Oh,
have one? Did I have two floppy disks? It's so hard to keep track of these things. He's being such a prick about it.
it's true. I
I
love when
love
he's
that.
being a prick in this one. This is like the one where he gets to be the
I
most
mean, Tropic
pricky.
Thunder. Come on now,
Oh,
like Cruz plays a really
that's the
good
best.
asshole.
It's
I
true. He
wish
nails it.
he'd let that fly more in movies, but I love his Mission Impossible run, and I'm always like, what is he gonna do next? Uh,
Yeah, it's
and
true.
then I think the favorite kill category, I think this is pretty like unanimous. I don't think there's any other kill that would really outdo it. It's got to be Emilio, right, on the elevator.
Yeah. Yep.
Okay, yeah.
Yep. Yeah. It's just, I mean, it's a bummer that Kristen Scott Thomas doesn't get to be in this movie more and just kind of gets it through the fence. but that visual of the flash image there, it is gnarly. It really is.
It just I always forget that they show that much, like when, and so that I always forget, and then I'm like, whoa, they actually show the thing going into his face. Like it's so
Right?
they don't show it like, you know, fully like R-rated, like blood and everything, but you see impact. And so it's like
Yep.
that's what makes it, and it's Emilio Estevez. How could they kill Emilio?
Right? Gordon Bombay. No.
It's but yeah, that it's still really shocking. And yeah, like you put like 2 weeks of elevator deaths, like it really it's I don't know what it is, but they hit differently for sure.
It's yeah, I don't know how many elevator deaths there end up being in all these movies, but I think these are two
Final
top
Destination 2
quality.
though, as I mentioned last
Ooh,
week, that's got
that's
to
right.
be
That's
up
right.
there. That's
That's
like one of
right.
my favorites because they actually show the gore of it. I'm a gore hound, so you know I
So
like seeing those
good.
things.
Yep. Same.
um,
Same.
there's a ton of like, you know, information about this too. Like it's one of those, like, because this is such a historical movie. Um, I already
Mm-hmm.
mentioned like that Cruz kept hitting his head on the floor in this in the, you know, the heist sequence at
Yep.
Langley. And so he eventually put coins in his shoes to balance that out. I guess because he was the
You had to, for the
front.
weight.
Yeah, the weight in the front half was a little more, so he had to balance it out. So I thought that was funny. Um,
Yep.
yeah, I also mentioned that the you know, the CD magic sleight of hand trick was actually done by Cruz. But yeah, if you know anything about Cruz, like he really throws himself into the physicality of the roles. Like in Cocktail, he's actually making the drinks. What's the pool one he did? Is that I can't remember the name of it. One for the month?
Oh, yeah.
No, he did
Something
the
like
pool
that.
one. Yeah, but he learned how to play pool with guys. You know, like he when you see Cruz doing stuff like that, you should just automatically assume that this guy's actually doing it. Is what I'm
Yes,
saying.
he commits. Yep.
Yeah. So I love that scene too. I think that was a good call by you. Um, yeah, this is the only film in the franchise where Ethan Hunt doesn't fire a gun, and doesn't have any shootouts or gunfights. Which and
Yeah.
again, it's
Yeah.
really impressive that it's still suspenseful without having to do that. You don't need
Yep.
it. Yeah.
Well,
Um,
especially because I
yeah.
think here it's about the suspense, less about the shock factor. And there's something just
Yeah.
cool about knowing that they could always pull it back because they kind of established that Ethan Hunt does go here.
And it lets you in the sequels go bigger. You know, like it's like you don't
Yep,
start from 100 and then where do you go? It's like,
exactly.
you know, this one started pretty low key, and then, you know, John Woo in the sequel, I can't say it was low key, but this one being like low key as it was, let those other directors come in and like do their huge thing, you know.
Exactly.
Um, so yeah, so I think
Exactly.
it's
I
like the
think
perfect first movie.
right, right. It's like we revisited a first movie last week too that was,
Oh yeah,
spanning
Resident Evil.
decades
Yep.
as well. And so it is kind of interesting that, when a franchise is going on for like 30 years, it's amazing to see the different filmmakers that can touch it. And I'm just like
Crazy.
so
It's been
happy that
25 years.
right,
It's so
right.
nuts.
But like
Yeah.
I'm just happy De Palma has one of these more centralist films that like anyone could watch and appreciate his craft at. Because as you said earlier, this is not usually how he rolls. He's usually a little bit more deranged, as it were.
Hmm.
And I like that he's able to bring
Yeah.
those hints here, but doesn't he still gave
Well, I would
something that's
say
like easy enough for anyone?
to that point, like one of my favorite films, like to this day, like growing up was Scarface, and like it's like the same
Mm-hmm.
thing where like I appreciated it just on the, you know, epic gangster level as a teenager and as a kid, but like as a film person, like watching it through a De Palma lens, I'm like, he's
Mm,
doing his signature shit in Scarface too.
that's right.
So it makes me just fall in love with that movie even more. You know, even though like the film Twitter like snobs like will never put that in their top. I'm like, you know what? I don't care. Scarface still one of the best.
It's so good. It's so good.
It really is.
Scarface nails it.
I would say Blowout is still my favorite De Palma now, though. Blowout kind of usurped Scarface. As sad as that was, I'm just like, yeah, Blowout's just a masterpiece. I love Blowout too.
I still can't decide.
What about you?
I still can't decide.
Too many bangers.
It's true. It's like too many of them have sequences that I'm like, that's my favorite whole movie, and then I'm like, no, you can't have all of them. So it's hard, but I feel like I love Dress to Kill. I just feel like Dress to Kill is fucking crazy.
That would be in my top like 5 for sure. And like Carrie too is like one of my favorites. Like, yeah. So and for the purpose of the show, I was trying to think like if we ever could do a De Palma again, we have like the Untouchables would be a candidate, and I would say Scarface too is like known for the gratuitous violence. So
it's true.
So those would be our 2 options in the future. I'm keeping those open if you ever want to do those. I'm totally down.
I definitely do. So let's definitely earmark those. Amazing.
That's all I got, pretty much.
I was going to say we have to do some De Palma stuff, and I feel like we just have so many people to talk about. I love that. Mm-hmm. I'm just so grateful for our chat.
I know. It's like I don't get to geek out about De Palma enough.
Right?
Never here. Enough. So whenever I do, I get a chance to. So, but yeah, you wanna do our plugs real quick, and then we can get out of here.
Yes, let's do it. Where can the people find you?
All right, yeah, you can go Twitter, Rampage_Misfit. I'm on there talking movies all the time. And then my official movie pages are at Misfit_Minded. But yeah, where can the people find you?
The people can find me on Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook at Shani B Movies.
All right, yeah. And thanks again for listening. We will catch you on another episode next time of Movie Buffs.